obrigada a todos pela vossa comparência. Vamos ouvir o professor Nigel Warburton com uma comunicação subordinada ao título Why Ask What is Art? Nigel Warburton é um filósofo freelancer, escritor, podcaster e professor. No conjunto dos seus livros destacam-se elementos básicos de filosofia, pensar de A a Z, liberdade de expressão, uma breve introdução, uma pequena história da filosofia e uma obra muito apropriada para a conferência de hoje. O que é a arte? Diálogo e questão. Todas estas obras já foram traduzidas para a língua portuguesa. Escreveu ainda uma biografia sobre o arquiteto modernista Arnold Goldfinger e editou um livro sobre o fotógrafo Bill Brandt. Ele é provavelmente mais conhecido pela série de podcasts que fez com David Edmonds, Philosophy Bites, da qual já se realizaram mais de 25 milhões de downloads, sendo a base de 3 livros com esse título. Nigel ensina regularmente cursos de estética no Tate Modern e contribui para o jornal Guardian com uma pequena opinião intitulada O Filósofo Moral. Hoje ele vai abordar a questão por que razão perguntar o que é a arte, ou em inglês, Why Ask What is Art? Thank you very much for coming. We welcome you and yeah, you can begin.
Thank you very much for that. I'm delighted to be here. My topic is Why Ask What is Art? It's a beautiful day. You're in a beautiful city. You're in a beautiful art museum with fantastic art. There's an interesting question why you're here talking about art or thinking about art or listening to me talking about art or encouraging you to think about what art is, rather than looking at art or being on the beach or being with your family. Maybe you're with your family here, but or seeing friends, watching the television. There are thousands of things you could be doing. Why ask the question, what is art? I've been to 2 funerals this year. People die, life's short. There's only so many things we can do in a lifetime. And we have to make important decisions about how we use our time on earth. And this, to me, it's important to think, is the question, what is art, one worth devoting time to? I'm not going to undermine the whole day's activities or encourage you to leave at this point. To give the punchline away, I do think there is value in spending some of your life asking the question, what is art? Not all of your life, not every minute of your waking day, not at the expense of looking at art and thinking about particular real artworks. But I do think the philosophical questions about what art is are fascinating, and they are worth considering in some depth, for everybody actually. So, the structure of what I'm going to talk about this morning is basically this. I'm going to look at 5 answers, not all of which have the same weight. Not all of them are as convincing for me, but there are five kinds of answers I've just plucked out of the hat, which are attempts at answering this question. So I won't say much about them now, I'll go through them as they come up. But the first one is explaining anxious objects. Works of art, or putative works of art, things which might be thought works of art, which are created often to subvert or challenge the existing conceptions of what art is. And most contemporary art museums have many of these objects, and to some degree it's subjective which objects really challenge you about the nature of art, and I'm going to be talking about those. So one reason for asking what is art is to try and explain what's going on there. Another one is to understand the human condition, because art is quite central to human activity, so it's not absurd to think about what art is. Perhaps you haven't thought about it this way, but I've already hinted at this in my introduction. When you answer the question, what is art, you may, or focus on the question, what is art, you may be actually doing it partly because you're trying to understand whether it's something worth devoting time, energy, perhaps money even, to. And these are ethical questions, questions about how you should live. Should art be central to your life, or is it ultimately something quite trivial? the question, what is art philosophically, is an incredibly difficult puzzle to solve, and I don't think anybody has cracked it. Again, I'm sorry to say that, but I don't think it's a puzzle which hasn't got an adequate solution yet. But the motivation for asking what is art might be that it's a challenge. You know, there's an interesting challenge. Here's a puzzle that needs solving. I think have I convinced somebody to leave already? That was good going. The last reason I'm going to look at is because I think it can encourage you to see things differently. Things both in the sense of objects, but in the sense of changing your outlook on life. There's an idiom to see things differently, to look at things differently, but it's also to see material objects differently. So I think that's I'm going to explain that one when I get to that. Okay, that's okay. Two minutes to go. Okay, so let's look at the first idea. That one of the reasons why you might want to ask the question, what is art, is because you've been challenged by the things you find in an art gallery. There are lots of things in this gallery which are quite challenging. So the classic example, of course, is Marcel Duchamp's Fountain from 1917. I think we probably need to dim the lights slightly so you can see this. If you turn them right off, you could actually preempt something I'm going to talk about later with Martin Creed's work. Okay. So Marcel Duchamp's Fountain was a urinal from a production line that he famously took as a ready-made work of art, just signed it with the name of a fictitious artist, R. Mutt, and exhibited it on a plinth in an open exhibition in New York in 1917. And it was a real challenge to the convention that artworks were handmade, that they were beautiful, although this has come to be seen as beautiful by some people. I've heard people describe the lines of Marcel Duchamp's Fountain in a kind of awe, as it prefiguring some modernist architecture. It's kind of Corbusian look. And so, but that he was trying to find something that was deliberately anti-aesthetic. So he was looking to find an object which didn't exhibit the traditional aesthetic quality of beauty, was not handmade by the artist, and it was also, I think, possibly a joke about an open exhibition, an exhibition where anything could be put in. It was a challenge to the idea that you really could put anything into the exhibition. So Duchamp's Fountain is the paradigm, the quintessential anxious object, this object that challenges us to think about what is art. So if you're at all involved in the visual arts, you're going to meet these objects from time to time, and they are invitations to think about what art is, because in a sense they're part of an ongoing dialogue about what art can be. Another example of that would be Man Ray's metronome, which he turned into a work of art. This was an old battered metronome with some bits missing, which he had in his studio in Paris with a cut-out eye. Originally, I think it might have been a kind of encouragement to himself to work harder. Obviously, a metronome, when it's running, beats the time and alludes to time passing. The eye, like the eye of in the panopticon, it's watching you, not working perhaps. But then it became an artwork when he first of all called it object to be destroyed. When his relationship with Lee Miller, the beautiful model, then great photographer, when that relationship broke down, he was deeply depressed, and he cut out an image of Lee Miller's eye and stuck it on the metronome. And he wrote out that the instructions for this work of art were: cut out the eye from a photograph of one who has been loved but is seen no more. Attach the eye to the pendulum of a metronome and regulate the weight to suit the tempo desired. Keep going to the limit of endurance. With a hammer, well aimed, try to destroy the whole with a single blow. So this was an invitation. This object is again a ready-made. There's very little that he's done apart from attach the eye. This is a found object, as it were, and it's turned into an invitation to perform a kind of action which presumably he didn't intend literally, but in the 1950s in Paris, some students took it literally when they actually stole this, the original work from a museum and allegedly destroyed it with a pistol. They didn't use a hammer, they shot it. Now this then has an afterlife. Man Ray used the insurance money from the artwork to purchase 100 similar metronomes and then recreated the work as indestructible object. And so it's an interesting ontological question about which thing the artwork was here, whether it was the idea of it, whether it was the object from the moment he started putting Lee Miller's image on it. Was the artwork ever destroyed? And when it's given a new name, is it the same artwork that it was before, or is it a different new artwork that's got different meaning? Those sorts of questions arise immediately for this particular anxious object, and many artworks bring up this kind of philosophical questioning almost immediately. If you're trying to think about, what is this? Is it even a work of art? Was it a work of art when it was just in the studio? Then it was in Man Ray's studio, so you think, well, it's an artist's possession. Lots of artist possessions in the studio are works of art that have yet to be displayed. But in this case, he may not have thought of it as an artwork until he put Lee Miller's eye on the piece. And then is the destruction of it, because he did invite the destruction of it, is the destruction of it part of the artwork, even though it wasn't carried out with a hammer? What happens if you destroy the 100 or so remaining instantiations of this? Has the artwork been destroyed? Those are all philosophical questions that this one raises. Another classic anxious object, Tracey Emin's My Bed, caused a lot of consternation when she exhibited this. If you don't know the work, it's simply Tracey Emin's bed with all the debris that was around it when she was suicidal, and old gin bottles, dirty underwear, other even less savoury things. And it's a kind of autobiographical piece. Some people talk about the strong narrative element in the piece.